The wind didn't just howl across the New Mexico plains. It screamed. It ripped dust from the baked earth and threw it in your eyes, your mouth, your soul. By midday, the sun turned the ground into a skillet, and the heat rising from the pastures looked like ghosts dancing. The land was cracked, broken, just like the men who tried to tame it. On a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of Silver Creek Ranch, Elias Morgan sat on his black stallion still as a statue. He was the king of this broken kingdom, the owner of one of the richest ranches in the territory, and a king with a rich kingdom is always a target. The drought had been strangling his land for weeks. The streams were gone, leaving behind muddy scars. His cattle were thirsty, his men were tired, and whispers of rustlers, desperate men with nothing to lose, slithered through every saloon in Santa Fe. Elias had a target on his back, and he knew it. He swung down from his horse, his boots hitting the porch of his sprawling ranch house with a heavy thud. He was a tall man, built not by wealth, but by work. His eyes were the color of steel, and they'd seen too many sleepless nights. Money hadn't made him soft. It had made him sharp. It had made him cold. "Boss, got movement on the road," a young cowboy named Tom O'Connor shouted, pointing a dusty finger toward the trail. Elias squinted, his eyes cutting through the shimmering heat. A single rider? No. It was two figures. A woman, slumped over a horse that looked like it was about to collapse. And beside her, 3 small children trudging barefoot through the dirt, their clothes nothing more than rags. They were small, fragile shapes against a landscape that ate people for breakfast. And seeing them, something shifted in Elias's chest. A lock he'd kept tight for years suddenly felt loose. "Jacob!" Elias barked. His foreman, Jacob Hill, a man with shoulders as wide as a barn door and eyes that missed nothing, strode over. "Looks like trouble, boss," Jacob said, his voice low. "Folks that desperate, they don't come alone. They bring trouble with them." Elias didn't take his eyes off the road. "Maybe," he muttered, "or maybe they just got nowhere else to go." The woman and her children stopped at the main gate, looking like ghosts who'd lost their way. One of the guards, a rifle resting easy in his arms, called out, "State your business, ma'am." The woman lifted her head. Her face was a mask of exhaustion, but her eyes held something else, something unbreakable. Her voice was thin, but it cut through the air like a razor. "I need to speak with the owner. It's urgent." Elias walked down the porch steps, his boots kicking up little puffs of dust. The children hid behind their mother, their eyes wide with a fear that said they'd seen too much of the world already. They looked at him like he was their judge, jury, and executioner, all rolled into one. "I'm Elias Morgan," he said, his voice even, not warm, but not cruel either. "What brings you to Silver Creek?" The woman swallowed, her lips cracked and bleeding. "My name is Hannah Morales," she said, and every word seemed to cost her a piece of her soul. "I have $1 and 3 children, but I need work, Mr. Morgan, any kind of work." The words hung in the dead, silent air. The ranch hands looked at each other, a silent question passing between them. A woman and 3 kids. That was a distraction. In a time of drought and rustlers, a distraction could get you killed. And then there was Marshall Roberts, the lawman who was sniffing around Silver Creek, just waiting for Elias to make a single mistake. "Where are you from?" Elias asked, stepping closer. He saw the raw blisters on the children's feet. He saw the droop in their shoulders. They hadn't just been walking. They had been surviving. "Michoacan," she whispered. Her accent was faint, but it was there. "My husband. He's gone. Bandits took everything. Our home. Our animals." She looked down at her children. "We have nothing left." Her oldest boy, who couldn't have been more than 10, stepped forward. Dirt streaked his face, but his back was straight as an arrow. "I can work, sir," he said, his voice filled with a pride that didn't match his size. "I can ride. I can shovel. Anything." Elias looked at them. The woman, who looked like a strong wind, could knock her over. The boy, standing like a tiny soldier, a little girl clutching a doll made of rags, and the youngest, a toddler, hiding behind his mother's torn skirt. This wasn't just a family. This was the wreckage of one. "What can you do?" he asked Hannah, but he already knew the answer he was going to give. "Cook, clean, sew. I can care for animals," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. "I will work harder than any man you have, and my children, they will not be a burden." Jacob Hill stepped up beside Elias, his voice a low grumble. "Boss, we can't take in every stray that wanders up this road. You know Roberts is just looking for an excuse. He'll twist this. He'll say you're harboring vagrants. He'll use it against you." Elias didn't even look at his foreman. His steel-gray eyes were fixed on Hannah, and for the first time that day, the coldness in them thawed, just a little. "You'll work in the kitchen," he said, his voice firm, cutting through Jacob's protests. "Harriet Ross runs that kitchen. She's tough, but she's fair. You'll do exactly as she says. In return, you and your children get a roof over your heads and food in your bellies." Hannah's knees nearly gave out. Relief washed over her face, so powerful it was like watching a parched flower get its first drop of rain. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," she whispered, her hands clasped together. "You will not regret this." "I hope not," Elias said. He turned to the young cowboy. "Tom, take them to the workers' quarters. Get them water. Get them food." As Tom led the small, broken family away, Elias stood on the porch watching them go. He saw the way Hannah walked, her spine straight despite the weight of the world on her shoulders. It reminded him of someone. It reminded him of his wife, a memory he kept locked away in a part of his heart he never visited. Jacob's voice was a low growl beside him. "She'll bring trouble, boss. You mark my words." Elias didn't answer. He just looked at the horizon, where dark clouds were starting to gather. He knew Jacob was right. A storm was coming, but what he didn't know was that the storm wasn't in the sky. It had just walked right through his front gate. The first hint that something was wrong came from a glint of silver. Hannah was settling her children into the small, clean bunk in the workers' quarters. It wasn't much, but after weeks on the road, a roof and a mattress felt like a palace. As she helped her youngest, Peter, out of his tattered shirt, a small object fell from a hidden pocket sewn into the lining. It hit the wooden floor with a soft clink. It was a locket. Silver, intricately carved with a twisting vine pattern. It was fine work, expensive work. It was not something a penniless woman fleeing bandits would have. Michael, her oldest, saw it too. His eyes widened. "Ma, what is that?" Hannah quickly snatched it up, her fingers closing around the cool metal. "It's nothing, Michael, just a trinket." She tucked it away, her movements quick, almost guilty. But the look on her face wasn't one of sentiment. It was fear. The next morning, she was in the main kitchen before dawn. The head cook, Harriet Ross, was a woman built like an oak tree, with hands that could snap a man's wrist. She eyed Hannah with suspicion. "Mr. Morgan might have a soft spot for strays, but I don't," Harriet said, slamming a sack of flour onto the table. "You work, or you're out. Simple as that. Your children stay out of my way." "Yes, ma'am," Hannah said, her voice quiet. She set to work, her hands moving with a speed and efficiency that surprised Harriet. She kneaded dough, chopped vegetables, and cleaned with a feverish intensity, as if she was trying to scrub away a memory. She never made eye contact. She just worked. Outside, Jacob Hill was watching the kitchen. He saw the way Hannah moved, the way she kept to herself. He saw the fear in her eyes, and he didn't see a victim. He saw a liar. He found Elias by the corral, watching Tom O'Connor show young Michael how to brush down a horse. "That woman," Jacob started, not bothering with pleasantries. "There's something off about her." Elias didn't turn around. "She's a widow with 3 kids, Jacob. She's scared." "She's more than scared," Jacob insisted. "I saw her last night. She was hiding something shiny. Look at her, boss. She doesn't act like a woman who's lost everything. She acts like a woman who's afraid of being found." Elias finally turned, his gray eyes unreadable. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting Marshall Roberts has tried everything else to get at you. He's spread rumors. He's threatened your men. What if this is his new plan? What if he sent her? A pretty face, a sad story, get inside the gates, learn our routines, our numbers, find a weakness. The idea was like a drop of poison in a well. Elias looked toward the kitchen. He'd been moved by her plight, by the memory of his own lost family. But Jacob was his foreman, a man who had been with him for 15 years. His instincts were rarely wrong. Keep an eye on her, Elias said, his voice turning cold again. But be discreet. I don't want her spooked if she's innocent. And if she's not? Jacob pressed. Elias's jaw tightened. Then she's made the biggest mistake of her life. That afternoon, the tension on the ranch was thick enough to cut with a knife. The cowboys watched Hannah from a distance. Harriet gave her the worst jobs, testing her, trying to break her. But Hannah just kept working, her face a blank mask. Later, Elias walked into the kitchen. The room went silent. Hannah froze, a wet rag in her hand. Mrs. Morales, he said, his voice flat. I have a question for you. You said bandits took everything you owned. Hannah nodded, not meeting his eyes. Yes, sir. Everything, he repeated, his gaze sharp enough to pierce steel. You're telling me you walked away with nothing but the clothes on your back? She hesitated for just a second too long. Yes, nothing. It was a lie. He could see it in the flicker of her eyelids, in the way she held her breath. Jacob had been right. She was hiding something. He didn't press her. He just turned and walked out. But the seed of doubt had taken root. Who was this woman? And what did she really want at Silver Creek Ranch? That night, Hannah sat on her bunk, her children asleep around her. She pulled out the silver locket, her thumb tracing the intricate carvings. Her hands were trembling. She wasn't a spy. She wasn't a threat. She was a prisoner of a secret far more dangerous than anyone on this ranch could possibly imagine. And her secret was tied directly to the one man she was starting to fear the most. Elias Morgan. The storm broke 2 days later. Not with rain, but with the thunder of hooves. Marshall Roberts rode into Silver Creek Ranch like he owned it, 4 deputies flanking him, their faces hard and smug. They didn't stop at the gate. They rode right into the main yard, kicking up dust, a clear show of disrespect. Elias met him on the porch, flanked by Tom and a few other hands. Jacob Hill stood slightly behind them, his face a mask of neutrality, but his eyes were darting toward the kitchen. Morgan, Roberts said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. Just paying a social call. Heard you took in some new employees. His gaze flicked toward Hannah, who was watching from the kitchen doorway, her face pale. My hiring practices are my own business, Marshal, Elias said, his voice dangerously low. Roberts chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Everything in this territory is my business, especially when it involves vagrants with questionable histories. Rumor has it your new cook came from Michoacan. Nasty business out there. Bandits. Hannah flinched, and Elias saw it. He saw the terror that flashed in her eyes before she could hide it. She's a widow, Elias said, stepping forward. She works hard. She's under my protection. Is she now? Roberts leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes narrowing. You've got a big heart, Morgan. Too big. It's going to get you in trouble. One of these days, you're going to protect the wrong person. He shot another look at Hannah, a look that was part threat, part promise. Then he wheeled his horse around and rode out, his men following like vultures. The moment they were gone, Jacob cornered Elias. You see? He knows about her. This is a setup, boss, I'm telling you. He's using her to bait a trap. Elias didn't answer. He was watching Hannah, who had quickly retreated back into the kitchen. The fear on her face had been genuine. But was it fear of Roberts? Or fear of being exposed? That night, under the cover of darkness, Jacob Hill did something he'd never done before. He saddled his own horse quietly and slipped away from the ranch. He rode fast, not toward town, but toward a series of rocky hills a few miles east. In a hidden ravine, a single campfire burned. Marshal Roberts was waiting for him. "Did he take the bait?" Roberts asked, tossing a half-empty bottle of whiskey to Jacob. Jacob caught it and took a long swallow. "He's suspicious, but he's soft. The story about her being a widow, it gets to him. He lost his own wife and kid, you know." "I know all about Morgan's tragic past," Roberts sneered. "It's what makes him so predictably noble and so easy to break. Is she playing her part?" "She's terrified," Jacob said, "which works just as well. He thinks she's a victim he needs to save." He paused, the firelight flickering in his eyes. He's starting to trust her. Just a little. "Good," Roberts said, "because we need what she has, and we need Morgan to lead us right to it." He looked at Jacob, his smile thin and cruel. "You're doing good work, Hill. When Silver Creek is mine, you'll get your piece of the pie. A bigger piece than Morgan ever gave you." Jacob nodded, but a knot of unease tightened in his gut. He'd worked for Elias for 15 years. The man was hard, but he was fair. Yet Jacob had watched Elias build an empire while he remained a hired hand. The resentment had festered for years, a slow-burning poison. Roberts had promised him wealth, land, respect. All he had to do was betray the man who had trusted him for over a decade. He rode back to the ranch feeling like a ghost, haunted by the choice he had made. He was the real snake in the grass. He was the one setting the trap. And Hannah Morales, the frightened woman in the kitchen, was just the bait. He had spent days convincing Elias that Hannah was a threat, projecting his own treachery onto her. And it was working perfectly. The next morning, Elias made a decision. He needed to know what Hannah was hiding. He found her by the creek, washing clothes, her children playing nearby. "Mrs. Morales," he began, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're going to talk. Now." He led her to the main house, into his private study. A room filled with leather-bound books, maps of his land, and the lingering scent of cigar smoke. He closed the door, the sound echoing in the silent room. "I'm going to ask you one more time," he said, his voice cold as a winter morning. "What are you hiding?" Hannah's composure finally broke. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't tell you. If I do, he'll kill my children." "Who will kill your children?" Elias demanded, stepping closer. "Roberts?" She shook her head, sobbing now. "Not just him. The man he works for." She reached into her dress and pulled out the silver locket. Her hand trembled as she held it out to him. "This is why they're after me. This is what they want." Elias took the locket. The moment his fingers touched the cool metal, he froze. He'd seen this locket before. He knew the intricate carvings of the twisting vine. He knew the small, almost invisible clasp. He opened it. Inside, there were no pictures. Instead, there were two sets of initials, expertly engraved. E.M. and M.M. Elias Morgan, and Mateo Morales, Hannah's late husband, and Elias's former business partner, the man he'd built this ranch with, the man he'd thought had betrayed him and vanished years ago. The world tilted on its axis. This woman wasn't a stranger. Her husband wasn't some random farmer. He was the ghost that had haunted Silver Creek for a decade. "Where did you get this?" Elias whispered, his voice hoarse. "It was my husband's," Hannah cried. "He told me if anything ever happened to him, I was to bring it here, to Silver Creek. He said it was the key." "The key to what?" Elias demanded, his mind reeling. Suddenly, everything Jacob had said, everything Roberts had done, it all snapped into a new, terrifying focus. They weren't after Hannah. They weren't even after the ranch. They were after a secret that Elias had buried a long, long time ago. A secret that was somehow connected to his dead partner. And that secret was about to burn Silver Creek to the ground. The study felt like it was closing in on Elias. The air was thick with the ghosts of the past. Mateo Morales, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 10 years, his best friend, his partner, the man who had helped him turn a patch of dusty land into an empire only to vanish without a trace, taking a chunk of Elias's trust with him. "My husband," Hannah said, her voice shaky. He wasn't a farmer. Not really. He knew things. About the land. About the railroad contracts. About men like Marshall Roberts. Elias's mind was racing. The railroad. That was the missing piece. For years, a powerful railroad company had been buying up land all over the territory, using strong-arm tactics and a corrupt legal system to push out smaller ranchers. Elias, with his wealth and influence, was the only one they couldn't bully. He'd been fighting them in court and in backroom deals for years, a silent war no one else knew about, and Marshall Roberts was their puppet. What did Mateo know? Elias asked, his voice tight. He kept a ledger, Hannah whispered. A record of all their dealings, bribes, illegal land seizures, threats, everything. He said it was his insurance policy. The names, the dates, the amounts. It was all in there, enough to bring them all down. The railroad men, the politicians, even Roberts. Suddenly, the bandits who had attacked her wagon made perfect sense. They weren't random thieves. They were Roberts's men, sent to find that ledger. They had killed Mateo, and now they were hunting her, believing she had it. Where is it? Elias asked. The ledger. I don't know, Hannah sobbed. He never told me. He just gave me the locket. He said the locket was the key and that you would know what it meant. Elias stared at the initials. EM and MM. It wasn't just a symbol of their partnership. It was a code, a memory surfaced, a conversation from over a decade ago, two young men dreaming of their future. We'll build it to last forever, Eli, Mateo had said, clapping him on the back. Our legacy carved in stone and wood. Wood. His eyes shot to the map on the wall. The original plot of Silver Creek. There was a small square marked on it, a place he hadn't thought about in years. The first cabin they had built, with their own hands, before the main house, before the wealth. It was a simple one-room structure, the place he had given to Hannah and her children when she arrived. The proof Roberts was looking for wasn't in a book. It was carved into the very bones of the ranch. The whole time, Hannah and her children had been sleeping in the one room that could get them all killed. He looked at Hannah, and for the first time, he didn't see a stranger or a threat. He saw the wife of his friend. He saw a woman who had been dragged into his war, and he felt a surge of guilt so profound it almost buckled his knees. He had misjudged her. He had let Jacob's poison cloud his mind. Jacob. The blood in his veins turned to ice. Jacob had been feeding him lies, pointing him toward Hannah, all while knowing the truth. He was working for Roberts. His foreman, the man he trusted with his life, had sold him out. We have to move you, Elias said, his voice urgent. You and the children. You're not safe here. Where can we go? Hannah asked, her eyes wide with terror. They're everywhere. Elias's mind was working fast. He wasn't just helping settlers with food and supplies anymore. He was running a full-blown sanctuary. For months, he'd been secretly funneling families, victims of the railroad's land grab, to hidden homesteads deep in the mountains. He had created a network, an underground railroad, for the dispossessed. It was the reason Roberts was so desperate to crush him. He wasn't just an obstacle, he was the leader of the resistance. I have a place, he said. A cabin in the hills. A man named Samuel Ross lives there. He's Harriet's brother. He's one of us. He'll keep you safe. Just then, the door to the study burst open. It was Tom O'Connor, his face pale and his breathing ragged. Boss! It's the north pasture. The fences have been cut. A whole herd of cattle. They're gone. Rustlers. But it wasn't random. It was a diversion. Elias knew it in his gut. He grabbed the rifle from the wall mount. Tom, get every available man and ride to the north pasture. Make it look like the whole ranch is responding. Jacob, he bellowed. Jacob Hill appeared in the doorway, his face a perfect picture of concerned loyalty. What is it, boss? You're with me, Elias said, his eyes like chips of ice. We're going to check the west perimeter. He was setting a trap of his own. He needed to get Jacob alone, away from the others. He turned to Hannah. Stay in this house. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. Do you understand? She nodded. clutching the locket to her chest. As Elias and Jacob rode out, the foreman felt a surge of triumph. The plan was working. The rustler diversion, which he had arranged, had pulled all the ranch hands away. Roberts and his men were waiting just over the ridge. They would storm the ranch, grab the woman, and tear the cabin apart looking for the ledger. By the time Elias got back, it would all be over. But as they rode, Elias steered them away from the west perimeter, heading instead toward a narrow, rocky canyon. "Boss, the perimeter is the other way," Jacob said, a flicker of unease in his voice. Elias reined in his horse and turned in the saddle. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet fury in his eyes was more terrifying than any shout. "I know," he said. "Tell me, Jacob, when you sold your soul to Roberts, did you get a good price for it?" The color drained from Jacob's face. He reached for his gun, but Elias was faster. The barrel of his rifle was leveled squarely at Jacob's chest before the foreman's hand even cleared his holster. "It's over, Jacob," Elias said, his voice raw with betrayal. "You picked the wrong side." Jacob stared at him, his mind scrambling. He was caught, trapped, but then a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You're too late, old man. While you were playing games with me out here, Roberts and his men hit the ranch. They've got your precious widow by now. They're probably tearing that little cabin apart as we speak." A gunshot echoed from the direction of the ranch. Then another. Elias's blood ran cold. He had miscalculated. He had tried to be clever, to trap the traitor, and in doing so he had left Hannah and her children completely exposed. Jacob laughed, a harsh, triumphant sound. "You lost, Elias. It's over." But what Jacob didn't see was the look in Elias's eyes. It wasn't defeat. It was the birth of a cold, single-minded rage. He had lost his wife and son once. He would not lose another family. Not again. "It's not over," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's just beginning." He was no longer a rancher protecting his land. He was a man with nothing left to lose, and a man like that is the most dangerous thing in the whole territory. The sounds of gunfire ripped through the air at Silver Creek. Hannah stood in the middle of Elias's study, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd heard Elias's order, lock the doors, open them for no one, but she couldn't just stand there. Her children were in that cabin, the cabin that held the secret. She ran out of the main house and sprinted across the yard, ignoring the shouts of the few remaining hands. The main force of Roberts's men, a dozen riders, were storming the front gate, but a smaller group had broken off, heading straight for the workers' quarters, straight for her children. She burst through the door of the small cabin just as two of Roberts's deputies were kicking it in. Michael, bless his brave and foolish heart, was standing in front of his younger siblings with a fireplace poker clutched in his small hands. "Get out!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Look what we have here," one of the men sneered, advancing on him. Hannah didn't think. She acted. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove top and swung it with all her might. The pan connected with the side of the deputy's head with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the floor, dazed. The second man turned, surprised, his hand going for his gun. But before he could draw, Harriet Ross filled the doorway, a double-barreled shotgun leveled at his chest. The cook's face was a thundercloud of fury. "Get your filthy hands off those children!" she boomed. The man froze, his eyes wide. He knew Harriet. Everyone knew Harriet, and everyone knew she wasn't a woman you crossed. He slowly raised his hands. "Take the kids and go!" Harriet barked at Hannah, never taking her eyes off the deputy. "The south trail to the creek. Now, I'll hold them off." Hannah didn't argue. She grabbed her children's hands and pulled them out the back window of the cabin. They scrambled into the scrub brush behind the quarters, just as more of Robert's men swarmed the yard. They ran, barefoot and terrified, the sounds of the raid echoing behind them, shouts, gunshots, the splintering of wood. Hannah knew what they were doing. They were tearing the cabin apart, searching for the ledger that wasn't there. Meanwhile, in the canyon, Jacob Hill saw the tide turn in Elias's eyes. He saw the cold fury replace the shock. He saw that he wasn't dealing with a rancher anymore. He was dealing with a predator. He made a desperate move. He spurred his horse, trying to bolt past Elias and escape down the narrow canyon. Elias fired, not at Jacob, but at the rock face above him. A shower of stones and dust rained down, causing Jacob's horse to rear in panic. The foreman was thrown from the saddle, landing hard on the rocky ground. His leg twisted beneath him with a sharp crack. He screamed, a sound of pure agony. Elias dismounted and walked over to him, his rifle still aimed at Jacob's chest. "The raid on my ranch," Elias said, his voice dangerously calm. "Was that just to get Hannah, or was there another reason?" Jacob, clutching his broken leg, spat a mouthful of bloody dust onto the ground. "You're a fool, Morgan. You think this is about you? It's never been about you. It's about progress. The railroad. You and your stupid little ranch are in the way." "And Hannah? She's the key," Jacob grunted through the pain. "Roberts doesn't think she has the ledger. He knows she doesn't, but he thinks she knows where it is. He's going to take her. He's going to make her talk. And you know Roberts. He has his methods." A cold dread washed over Elias. He had to get back. He had to stop them. He left Jacob there, groaning in the dust. He wouldn't kill him. That would be too easy. He would let the law he so despised deal with him. He turned his horse and galloped back toward the ranch, praying he wasn't too late. He rode into a scene from hell. One of the barns was on fire, flames licking at the dark sky. His men were pinned down, fighting a losing battle. And in the center of the yard, Marshal Roberts had Hannah. He was dragging her toward his horse, her children crying, held back by one of his men. "Let her go, Roberts!" Elias roared, skidding his horse to a halt. Roberts grinned, a flash of white teeth in a face grimy with smoke. "Morgan, glad you could join us. I've got what I came for. This lovely lady is going to help me find what your dead partner hid from me." He shoved Hannah forward. "Tell him, my dear. Tell him what happens to your children if you don't cooperate." Hannah looked at Elias, her eyes pleading. "Don't, Elias, it's not worth it." Elias raised his rifle. But he was outnumbered. Roberts's men had their guns trained on him, on his men, on Hannah's children. It was a stalemate, but they had all forgotten about one person. Michael. While all eyes were on the standoff between Elias and Roberts, 10-year-old Michael had slipped away. He had seen Tom O'Connor fall near the corral, his rifle skittering away into the shadows. With the heart of a lion, Michael had crawled on his belly through the dirt and chaos, his small body hidden by the smoke. He grabbed the rifle. It was almost as big as he was. He'd watched the cowboys practice. He'd listened to Tom explain how to load, how to aim. He rested the heavy barrel on a low fence post, just like he'd seen them do. He lined up the sight. His hands were shaking, but his resolve was pure iron. He wasn't aiming for Roberts. He was aiming for the rope in Roberts' hand, the one tied around Hannah's wrists. He took a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening. For a second, nobody moved. Then Roberts grunted in surprise, looking down at his hand. The rope, sliced clean in two, fell away. In that single moment of shock, all hell broke loose. Elias fired, not at a man, but at the lantern hanging from the burning barn's eaves. The lantern exploded, showering the ground near Roberts's men with burning oil. They scattered, yelling and batting at the flames. Tom, seeing his chance, rallied the ranch hands. "Now, push them back!" Hannah didn't hesitate. She scooped up Peter and Clara and ran for the cover of the main house. Roberts, his face contorted with rage, saw Michael by the fence, holding the oversized rifle. He raised his own pistol, aiming it directly at the boy. "You little brat!" he snarled. But before he could fire, Elias spurred his horse forward, slamming his stallion into Roberts's mount. Both men were thrown to the ground. They scrambled to their feet, fists flying, two titans locked in a brutal, desperate fight in the dirt and shadows of the burning ranch. The tide had turned. Roberts's men, their leader occupied and their ranks in disarray, began to fall back. They were horsemen and bullies, not soldiers. They couldn't win a ground fight. One by one, they fled into the night, leaving their marshal to his fate. Robert saw he was beaten. He landed one last punch on Elias's jaw and scrambled for his horse. "This isn't over, Morgan," he screamed, hauling himself into the saddle. "I'll be back, and I will burn this place to the ground with you and that whole family inside it." He galloped off into the darkness, a coward's retreat. Elias lay on the ground, gasping for breath, bruised and bleeding, but victorious. The fire crackled, the shouts died down, and a strange quiet fell over the yard. Hannah ran to him, her children close behind her. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his battered face. "Are you all right?" she whispered. He looked up, past her, to where Michael was standing, still holding the rifle, his small face streaked with soot and tears, looking terrified and proud all at once. Elias smiled, a bloody, painful grin. "Yeah," he coughed, "I'm all right." He had won the battle, but Roberts had promised a war, and Elias knew the marshal was a man who kept his promises. They were safe, for now, but the clock was ticking. They had the key, and they knew where the lock was. Now they just had to get to it before Roberts came back to finish the job. The dawn that followed the raid was quiet and grim. Silver Creek Ranch was wounded. The air, thick with the smell of charred wood and stale gunpowder, hung heavy over the survivors as they moved through the wreckage. The burned-out shell of the barn stood like a blackened skeleton against the pale morning sky. Elias, his face a roadmap of purple bruises and cuts, stood with Hannah and Harriet near the main house. The children were huddled together on the porch steps, wrapped in blankets, their eyes still wide with the horror of the night. Michael sat slightly apart, the rifle Tom had given him resting across his lap. He hadn't let it go. "He'll be back," Elias said, his voice a hoarse rasp. "Roberts won't let this go. He's been humiliated. Now it's personal." Hannah clutched the silver locket in her hand. "Then we have to get to the cabin. We have to find what Mateo hid before Roberts can regroup." "No," Elias said firmly. "He'll be expecting that. The cabin is the first place he'll watch. It's a trap." He looked at the faces around him, his loyal hands, the formidable cook, the woman he had wronged and then fought for, and the children who had been thrust into his war. "We can't stay here. The ranch is too exposed." His mind was already working, formulating a new, desperate plan. "Harriet," he said, turning to the cook, "your brother Samuel, his place in the hills, can he be trusted?" "With my life," Harriet said without hesitation. "And more importantly, with theirs." She nodded toward the children. "Good." Elias's gaze fell on Michael. He walked over and knelt in front of the boy, his joints groaning in protest. He looked at the rifle. "You were brave last night, son. Braver than any man I've ever known. But the fight isn't over. It's about to get harder." Michael looked up, his young face set with a resolve that was unnervingly adult. "I'm not scared." "I know," Elias said, a flicker of a smile touching his bruised lips. "And that's why I need you to do the hardest thing of all. I need you to leave." Michael's face fell. "No! I have to stay. I have to help you fight." "You will help me," Elias said, his voice firm but gentle. "By protecting your brother and sister. Roberts knows you're with me now. He knows what you did. He will target you. I need you safe. I need them safe. I'm sending you all with Harriet to Samuel's cabin. You'll stay there, hidden, until I can end this. Can you do that for me? Can you be the man of your family and keep them safe?" The boy's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. He looked at his mother, then at his younger siblings. He swallowed hard and gave a single, sharp nod. "I will." "There's something else," Elias said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The cabin here, the one your father built. Roberts will be watching it. But he doesn't know about Samuel's place. Samuel is a stonemason. He knows how to build things that last, things that hide secrets." He looked at Hannah. "The locket. Give it to me." She handed it to him. Elias took a small tool from his pocket and carefully pried open a false back on the locket, a feature he and Mateo had designed years ago. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, was not a key, but a small, tightly folded piece of paper. It was a diagram, a schematic of the original cabin. It showed a hidden compartment, built into the stone hearth of the fireplace. That was where the ledger was. "He's not going to find it," Elias said, "because we're going to move it." He turned to Tom O'Connor. "Tom, I need you to do something for me, and it might get you killed." Tom, his arm in a sling but his eyes clear, just nodded. "Name it, boss." "Tonight you and I are going back into that cabin. We're going to get that ledger. Then, you are going to take it to Samuel's place. It will be safer there than anywhere else in this territory." It was a suicide mission. Roberts would have men watching the ranch, watching that cabin, but it was their only chance. As night fell, they put the plan into motion. Harriet, Hannah, and the children slipped away on horseback, taking a little-used trail into the mountains, their silhouettes swallowed by the darkness. Elias and Tom waited. They watched the shadows around the workers' quarters lengthen. They could feel the eyes on them, the unseen watchers waiting in the darkness. "They're out there," Tom whispered, checking his pistol. "I know," Elias replied, "and they think we're stupid enough to walk right in the front door." He pointed to a storm cellar, its wooden doors half hidden by overgrown weeds, 20 yards from the cabin. "Mateo and I dug a tunnel. It connects that cellar to the fireplace in the cabin, a bolt hole in case of trouble." He looked at Tom. "It seems trouble has finally arrived." They slipped into the cellar, pulling the doors shut behind them. The air was cool and damp, smelling of earth and old secrets. Elias lit a small lantern, its light revealing a narrow, hand-dug tunnel. "Stay sharp," Elias whispered. "Let's go get our ammunition." They crawled into the darkness, inching their way toward the heart of the enemy's trap. Above them, Robert's men watched an empty cabin, waiting for a frontal assault that would never come. They were looking in the right place, but they were watching the wrong door, and they had no idea that the real fight was happening right under their feet. In the hills, Hannah held her children close as they rode. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made her flinch. She was terrified, but a new feeling was growing alongside the fear, a fierce, burning hope. She looked at Michael, riding tall beside Harriet, and saw not just her son, but a warrior in the making. They had taken her home, her husband, her safety. But they had not taken her spirit, and they had underestimated her son. That was a mistake they were going to regret. The war for Silver Creek was no longer just about land. It was about a legacy, and legacies, Elias Morgan was about to prove, were worth dying for. The tunnel was claustrophobic. A tight earthen wound burrowed beneath the ranch. Elias led the way, the lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the damp walls. The air was stale, and every sound, a scuff of a boot, a dislodged pebble, seemed to echo like a gunshot. Above them, they could hear the faint murmur of voices and the soft thud of horses' hooves. Robert's men. They were close. "They've surrounded the cabin," Tom whispered, his voice tight with tension. "Let them," Elias breathed, not stopping. "They're watching for ghosts at the front door while we come up through the floor." They reached the end of the tunnel, which opened into the base of the stone fireplace. A large, flat stone, designed to look like part of the foundation, was fitted with a hidden iron handle. Elias gripped it and pulled. With a low groan of stone grinding on stone, the block shifted, revealing the dark, silent interior of the cabin. They waited, listening. Nothing. Elias slowly poked his head up. The cabin was empty, a dark, silent tomb. The furniture was overturned, the floorboards pried up in places. Robert's men had already done a preliminary search and found nothing. Now they were waiting, convinced Elias would return for whatever was hidden here. Elias and Tom slipped out of the tunnel and into the room, moving like shadows. Elias went straight to the hearth. He ran his hand along the cool stone until he found it, a single, almost invisible seam in the mortar. Using the tip of his knife, he pressed a hidden catch. A section of the stone clicked inward, revealing a hollow compartment. And inside, Wrapped in oilcloth was Mateo's ledger. Elias pulled it out, his hands trembling slightly. This was it, the weapon that could end the war, the proof that could destroy Roberts and his powerful employers. He tucked it safely inside his coat. "All right," he whispered to Tom. "Let's get out of here." But as they turned to go back to the tunnel, a floorboard creaked on the porch outside. Then another. They froze. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, framed by the moonlight. It wasn't one of Roberts's deputies. It was Jacob Hill. He was leaning heavily on a crude crutch, his face pale and twisted with pain and hatred. And in his good hand, he held a pistol. "Going somewhere, boss?" Jacob rasped, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "I knew you had a trick up your sleeve. I knew you'd come for it." Elias slowly raised his hands, shielding Tom behind him. "It's over, Jacob. You've lost." "Have I?" Jacob limped into the room, his eyes wild. "Roberts thinks I'm lying useless in some canyon. He thinks you're a fool. But I know you better than that. I told him you'd try something like this, but he didn't listen. So I came myself." His eyes fixed on the bulge in Elias's coat. "Give it to me, Elias. Give me the ledger, and I'll let you and the boy walk out of here." "You know I can't do that," Elias said, his mind racing. "Then you'll die here," Jacob snarled, raising the pistol. "And I'll take it from your corpse. Roberts can have the ranch. I just want what's in that book. That's my retirement." Suddenly a voice shouted from outside. "He's in there! Hill is in the cabin!" Jacob had been followed. Robert's men were closing in. Jacob's eyes darted toward the door, his face a mask of panic. He was trapped between Elias and the men he had allied himself with. In that split second of hesitation, Elias acted. He kicked a small wooden stool into Jacob's injured leg. The foreman screamed and stumbled, his pistol firing wildly into the ceiling. "Tom, go!" Elias yelled, shoving him toward the tunnel. "Get the ledger to Samuels, now!" Tom didn't hesitate. He scrambled into the tunnel opening, just as the cabin door burst open and two of Roberts's men charged in. Elias dove behind an overturned table, pulling his own pistol. Gunshots exploded in the small space, the air filled with smoke and the smell of cordite. Elias fired twice, taking down one of the deputies. The other took cover, pinning Elias down. Outside, more men were coming. In the tunnel, Tom crawled as fast as he could, the precious ledger clutched in his hand. He could hear the gunfight behind him, each shot a hammer blow to his heart. He had to get away. He had to get the ledger to safety. Elias was counting on him. The whole future of Silver Creek was counting on him. He burst out of the storm cellar and into the cool night air. He didn't look back. He ran for the line of trees where he had a horse waiting. He swung into the saddle and dug his heels into the horse's flanks, galloping into the night. He had the evidence. But his boss, the man who had been like a father to him, was trapped behind him, fighting for his life. Back in the cabin, Elias was out of options. He was cornered, and more men were closing in. Jacob Hill, propped against a wall, was laughing, a horrible broken sound. "You're finished, Morgan," he cackled. "Your boy got away, but you're not going anywhere." Elias knew he was right. He couldn't shoot his way out, but he wasn't going to be taken alive, and he wasn't going to let Jacob win. He looked at the lantern he'd left near the fireplace, its flame still burning steadily, and then he looked at the splintered, dry wood of the cabin walls, the cabin Mateo had built. With a roar, he kicked the lantern over. The oil spilled across the floorboards, and the flames erupted with a hungry whoosh. Fire spread instantly, climbing the dry timber walls, turning the small cabin into a raging inferno within seconds. Jacob screamed, a sound of pure terror, as the flames engulfed the room. Elias didn't wait to watch. He took a deep breath and charged through the wall of fire, bursting out the back window, his clothes smoking. He rolled on the ground to extinguish the embers, and ran for the darkness of the woods, the shouts of his enemies and the roar of the fire pursuing him. He had escaped, but he had been forced to destroy the very first piece of his legacy. The cabin was gone. And Marshal Roberts, who now knew the ledger was real and in the wind, would be coming. Not just with deputies, he would be coming with an army. The final battle was about to begin. The 2 years that followed were a lifetime. For Michael, Clara, and Peter, life at Samuel Ross's hidden cabin was a strange mix of safety and suspense. Samuel, Harriet's brother, was a man carved from the mountain itself, quiet, tough, and wise. He didn't coddle the children, he trained them. He taught Michael how to track, how to read the clouds for weather, how to hunt with a quiet efficiency that left no trace. He taught him how to use a knife not just as a tool, but as an extension of his own hand. Most importantly, he taught him how to be patient. Anger is a fire that burns you from the inside out, Samuel would say, his voice a low rumble as they cleaned their rifles by the fire. Vengeance is a poison, but justice is a mountain. It's slow, it's steady, and in the end, it's immovable. You wait for the right moment to climb. Michael listened. He learned. The boy who had arrived in the mountains, all fiery impulse and grief, was slowly forged into something new. He grew taller, leaner, his face losing its boyish roundness and taking on the sharp angles of a man who has seen too much. The fire was still in his eyes, but now it was controlled, focused, like the point of a tempered steel blade. Hannah watched her son transform with a heart full of pride and fear. She worked alongside Harriet, turning Samuel's cabin into a home, her hands never idle. But every night, she would stare out at the vast, dark expanse of the territory and pray for 2 men, Elias and Tom. Word from the outside world was scarce, delivered by trusted riders in the dead of night. The news was grim. Marshal Roberts, enraged by the loss of the ledger and Elias's escape, had declared all-out war. He had used his influence to brand Elias Morgan an outlaw, a rustler, a murderer. He put a bounty on his head so high that every bounty hunter and gunslinger from Santa Fe to the border was looking for him. Silver Creek Ranch was seized under the guise of the law. Roberts and his men occupied it, turning Elias's home into their personal fortress. But Elias was a ghost. He and Tom O'Connor had vanished into the network of settlers they had once helped. They became legends, whispered about in saloons and around campfires. They said Elias Morgan could ride through a whole posse without being seen. They said he moved like the wind, striking at Roberts's supply lines, disrupting his operations, a constant thorn in the corrupt marshal's side. He was fighting a guerrilla war, chipping away at Roberts's empire one piece at a time. He never stayed in one place for long. He never saw Hannah or the children. It was too dangerous. But sometimes, a lone rider would leave a package at a prearranged drop point for Samuel, a bolt of cloth for Hannah, a new knife for Michael, a book for Clara. Small tokens that said, "I am still here. I have not forgotten you. The fight is not over." The ledger, Mateo's legacy, remained hidden at Samuel's cabin. It was their ace in the hole, the one weapon that could bring final victory. But it was useless until they had a way to get it into the right hands. An honest judge, a federal marshal, someone beyond Roberts's corrupt reach. The moment came on a cold autumn evening, 2 years after the fire. A rider arrived, exhausted, his horse lathered. He was one of Elias's men. "Roberts is moving," the man said, accepting a cup of water from Harriet. "He's got a new backer, a senator from back east. The senator is coming to Silver Creek to finalize the sale of the land. He's traveling by stagecoach. Roberts and a full escort of deputies will be meeting him at the Red Rock Pass tomorrow at noon." This was it. The opportunity they had been waiting for. Hannah found Michael by the creek, sharpening his knife on a whetstone. At 12 years old, he looked almost a man. "He's making his move," she said softly. Michael didn't look up from his work. "I know. I heard." He tested the blade with his thumb, his movements steady and sure. It's time. That night, the small cabin was alive with a tense, quiet energy. Samuel spread a map on the table. "Red Rock Pass is a bottleneck," he said, tracing the route with a calloused finger. "Steep walls, narrow road, a perfect place for an ambush." "But Roberts will be expecting one," Hannah argued. He'll have lookouts on the ridges. He'll be expecting an ambush from Elias, Michael said, speaking for the first time. He looked up, and the fire in his eyes burned brighter than ever before. He won't be expecting one from me. A plan began to form, a desperate, audacious plan that hinged on surprise and perfect timing. It involved 2 attacks, a diversion, led by Elias, to draw the main body of Roberts's men away, and a second, surgical strike on the stagecoach itself. "I'm going with you," Hannah said, her voice firm. Samuel and Harriet started to protest, but Michael silenced them with a look. "She's right. We need her." He looked at his mother. "Roberts knows your face. The senator doesn't. You'll be our way in." As they prepared, another rider arrived. It was Tom O'Connor. He was older, scarred, his youthful grin replaced by a grim determination, but his eyes lit up when he saw Michael. "The boss sent me," Tom said, clapping a hand on Michael's shoulder. He was stunned by how much the boy had grown. "He's ready. He'll hit them from the north. That should pull at least half of Roberts's men into the chase. He said to tell you he's proud of you, kid." Tom then turned to Hannah, and he said to give you this. He handed her a small, leather-bound pouch. Inside was a simple, elegant wedding band, the one that had belonged to Elias's first wife. Tears welled in Hannah's eyes, but she did not let them fall. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a promise of a future they had all been fighting for. At dawn, they rode out. A small, determined band against a corrupt empire. Hannah, dressed as a respectable lady traveling to meet her husband. Michael, disguised as her young, unassuming coachman. And Samuel and Tom, hidden in the rocks above the pass, with rifles and the ledger. Michael handled the small buggy with an expert's touch, his hands steady on the reins. He looked over at his mother. Her face was pale, but her eyes were like steel. "Are you ready, Ma?" he asked softly. She placed her hand on his. The simple gold band felt warm against her skin. "I've been ready for 2 years," she said. The buggy rounded a bend, and they saw it. Red Rock Pass. And waiting there, in the middle of the road, was the senator's stagecoach, surrounded by a dozen of Roberts's deputies. The marshal himself sat on his horse, confident, arrogant, completely unaware that his world was about to come to an end. Justice was a mountain, and they were about to make the final climb. The sun was high and hot over Red Rock Pass, beating down on the dusty road. Marshal Roberts sat impatiently on his horse, scanning the horizon. The senator's stagecoach was opulent, its polished wood and brass fittings gleaming under the New Mexico sky. It was a symbol of the power and wealth that was finally within Roberts's grasp. He felt invincible. Elias Morgan was a ghost, a nuisance, but no longer a real threat. The land was his. The future was his. A small, unassuming buggy came rattling down the road. Roberts barely gave it a glance. A woman and a boy. Probably some local farmer's wife. He had bigger things to worry about. The buggy pulled to a stop near the stagecoach. The woman, dressed in a simple but elegant traveling dress, stepped down. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice clear and polite. "I seem to be lost. I'm looking for the road to Santa Fe." Roberts waved a dismissive hand. "You're on it. Now move along. This is official business." "Of course," Hannah said, giving a slight curtsy. But she didn't move. She just stood there, her hands folded demurely in front of her. Her son, the young coachman, remained on his seat, his hat pulled low, his face hidden in shadow. He held the reins loosely, his posture relaxed. He looked like any other bored kid. He looked harmless. Roberts was about to bark at them to leave when a single gunshot echoed from the northern ridge, then another and another. A full-blown firefight erupted. "It's Morgan!" one of the deputies yelled. "He's attacking from the north." Robert's face twisted in a snarl of fury. "That damn cockroach! Half of you with me. We're going to end this right now. The rest of you, stay with the senator." Just as Elias had predicted, Robert's ego got the best of him. He galloped off with 6 of his men, charging toward the sounds of the fake battle Tom and a few of Elias's men were staging, leaving the senator protected by a skeleton crew. The moment they were gone, everything changed. Hannah's polite demeanor vanished. She looked the remaining deputies dead in the eye, and her face was no longer that of a lost farmer's wife. It was the face of a woman who had been to hell and back. "Now," she said, her voice ringing with command. From the rocks above, Samuel Ross opened fire. He wasn't aiming to kill. He was a stonemason, a builder, not a murderer. His shots were precise, kicking up dust at the deputies' feet, splintering the spokes of the stagecoach wheels, sending the horses into a panic. The deputies, confused and suddenly leaderless, scrambled for cover. And Michael moved. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a blur of calculated motion. He vaulted from the buggy seat, a pistol appearing in his hand as if from thin air. He landed in a crouch, firing 2 shots, not at the men, but at the harness connecting the stagecoach to its panicked horses. The leather straps snapped. The horses, freed from their burden, bolted down the road. The stagecoach was stranded. The door flew open, and the senator, a portly man with a face the color of spoiled ham, stumbled out shouting, "What is the meaning of this? I am a United States Senator." "We know who you are," Hannah said, stepping forward. Her son was at her side now, a second pistol in his other hand, moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned gunslinger. The remaining deputies, seeing they were outmaneuvered and facing 2 people who clearly knew what they were doing, threw down their guns. "This is an outrage!" the senator sputtered. "Roberts will hear of this!" "He's a little busy right now," Michael said, his voice low and steady, a voice the senator would hear in his nightmares. Tom O'Connor came sliding down the rocks, the oilskin-wrapped ledger in his hand. He tossed it to Hannah. She caught it and held it out to the senator. "My name is Hannah Morales," she said, her voice shaking with 2 years of suppressed rage and grief. "And this is the legacy of my dead husband. It's a record, Senator. A record of every bribe Marshall Roberts has taken from your employers, every family he's ruined, every acre he's stolen, every man he's murdered. It's all in there, including the payments made to you." The senator's face went from red to a pasty white. He stared at the ledger as if it were a coiled rattlesnake. This is a lie. Slander." "Is it?" Michael said, taking a step closer. "Why don't we open it up and show your new friends from the territorial government? I hear a federal marshal is on his way to Santa Fe. I'm sure he'd find it very interesting reading." Checkmate. The senator deflated like a punctured balloon. His power, his career, his freedom, it was all tied to the secrets in that book. From the north, the gunfire had stopped. A lone rider appeared on the ridge. It was Elias. He sat on his stallion, watching the scene below, a silent, avenging angel. His diversion had worked. The trap had been sprung. Suddenly, a horse came galloping back down the road. It was Roberts. He must have realized his mistake, realized he'd been tricked. He rode like a madman, his face a mask of pure hate. He saw the scene. His men disarmed, the senator cornered, Hannah and Michael in control. He saw his empire crumbling to dust. He raised his pistol, ignoring everyone else, and aimed it straight at Michael, the boy who had started it all. "I'll kill you!" he screamed, but he never fired the shot. A rifle cracked from the ridge above, a single, perfect shot. Roberts jerked in the saddle. A small, dark hole appeared in the center of his chest. He looked down, a look of utter surprise on his face. He toppled from his horse and hit the dust with a lifeless thud. Everyone looked up at the ridge. It wasn't Elias who had fired. It was Samuel, the quiet stonemason, the man who built things. He had just finished the most important job of his life. Justice, like a mountain, was immovable. Silence fell over Red Rock Pass. It was over. Elias rode down from the ridge. He dismounted, his eyes never leaving Hannah. He walked toward her, past the defeated senator, past the captured deputies. He stopped in front of her, his face bruised and weathered from 2 years on the run, but his eyes were full of a light she thought she'd never see again. He didn't say a word. He just reached out and took her hand, his fingers closing over the simple gold band she wore. Michael stood beside them, no longer a boy, not yet a man, but something forged in fire and faith. He looked at Elias, and Elias looked back at him, and in that silent gaze, a whole new legacy was born. They had lost their homes, their pasts, their innocence, but they had found something more important. They had found each other. They walked away from the wreckage of Robert's corrupt world, not as survivors, but as a family. The story of Silver Creek Ranch became a legend in New Mexico, a tale of how a small group of ordinary people stood up to a giant and won. They rebuilt the ranch, not just with wood and stone, but with hope and courage. Elias Morgan, the outlaw rancher, was pardoned, his name cleared. He used his wealth and the evidence from the ledger to help the families Roberts had ruined reclaim their land. He married Hannah on the porch of the new ranch house, with their children, all their children, by their side. Silver Creek became more than just a ranch. It became a sanctuary, a symbol of justice, a place where the broken could become whole again. It became a home. And if you ever find yourself riding through those high desert plains, and you feel a wind that seems to whisper stories of courage and redemption, you might just be near Silver Creek, a place built by a king who learned how to be a father, a queen who found her strength, and a young prince who proved that the heart of a warrior can beat in the chest of a child. If you enjoyed this story, and you believe that even in the darkest of times, there's always a light worth fighting for, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You never know what other legends are waiting to be told.